Was Trotsky a prophet who predicted the collapse of the USSR? Part 1. At the moment, in the Russian left-wing segment of the Internet, in addition to several educational channels, for example, the channel, Bad Signal, that really exposed bourgeois propaganda, we mostly have left-wing bloggers who almost all of it the same thing and on whom Trotskyist revelations periodically descend. Recently, such a revelation came down to Konstantin Semin, the former host of the program, Agitprop, on the TV channel, Russia-24. He suddenly realized that socialism is impossible in a single country, since socialism in a single country will necessarily fail, and in general there was no socialism in the USSR. We see a well-known left-wing blogger slipping into outright Trotskyism with his theories of a permanent revolution and a deformed workers' state. Fans of Trotskyist ideas, that is, Trotskyists, do not understand that Trotsky's theories about a permanent revolution and about a deformed workers' state are metaphysical. By a permanent revolution, in spite of all his subsequent justifications, Trotsky denies the moment of the rollback of the revolution. Thus, according to this theory, the socialist revolution must win all over the world or lose. There are no compromises and there can be no compromises. While history shows that the revolution has ebbs and flows, the revolution cannot be a whirlwind, in a few years, to fly through all the countries of the world to establish socialism, because in all the countries of the world capitalism is developed unevenly. Therefore, the victories and defeats of revolutions are inevitable in the transition of society from capitalism to communism. Moreover, it cannot be excluded that the transition to socialism can be carried out by winning elections, as in the countries in Eastern Europe in the late 1940s. This is a topic for a separate article. Trotskyism, on the other hand, disorganizes the proletariat, instilling in it a disbelief in its own strength, since the illusory nature of the world revolution, like a carrot for a donkey, condemns it to passively drag it along, thereby diverting the forces and energy of the masses to decisive action at a specific time. In the theory of the deformed workers' state, Trotsky, who pretends to be a devoted Marxist and follower of Lenin, descends into metaphysics, not understanding the true causes of the degradation of the Soviet nomenclature and bureaucracy. He brings this degradation to the fore, making it the cause of the restoration of capitalism in the USSR. Therefore, the Trotskyists consider him a prophet who predicted the collapse of the USSR 60 years before the collapse. But they do not understand that the degradation of the party nomenclature is a direct consequence of the preservation of the commodity shell of the products produced under socialism, no matter how incomprehensible this may seem to the Trotskyists, since production under socialism still has a private character in many branches of the national economy. As a result, commodity-money relations persist in society, which continuously generate petty bourgeois consciousness and philistinism by millions of acts of exchange of purchase and sale, which eventually led to the complete degradation of the party nomenclature and, as a result, to the restoration of capitalism and the collapse of the USSR. Here is what Lenin wrote about this in his work, The Infantile Disease of Leftism in Communism. The dictatorship of the proletariat is the most ferocious, the most acute, the most merciless war of the new class against a more powerful enemy, against the bourgeoisie, whose resistance is increased tenfold by its overthrow. even in one country, and whose power consists not only in the strength of international capital, in the strength of the international ties of the bourgeoisie, but also in the strength of habit, in the strength of small-scale production. For, unfortunately, there is still a great deal of small-scale production left in the world, and small-scale production gives birth to capitalism and the bourgeoisie constantly, daily, hourly, spontaneously, and on a Massachusetts scale. This text was voiced using Yandex SpeechKit. Both Lenin and Stalin understood this, but the post-Stalinist leadership of the USSR did not. No matter how many times the humanist, Khrushchev shot down shopkeepers and speculators, and no matter how many times the Gist and Andropov caught truants and put policemen in jail, because of their lack of intelligence, they fought only with the consequences, and not with the causes. While the reasons lay in the economic reforms that they directly brought to life. Therefore, the number of suicidal interior ministers would not have changed the situation and would have led to the same natural result, the collapse of the USSR. Contrary to Trotsky, the reason for the collapse of the USSR lies not in the party bureaucracy, but in the preservation of marketability under socialism. The fact is that with the growth of labor productivity, marketability begins to put pressure on the public sector, since with the growth of labor productivity and the growth of production capacity, the number of products produced increases, including the commodity shelf shape. On the one hand, the number of employees working in the field of trade and production is also increasing. On the other hand, having a direct material interest, they are interested in the deficit of products produced by the state, in order to satisfy this deficit by the market sector. This resulted in corruption, queues, the sale of goods from the underground, a small and poor assortment of consumer goods in state-owned stores and a wide selection of more expensive goods in consumer stores. Cooperation, underground workshops, black markets, various kinds of fraud with artificial scarcity, etc. in general, all the charms that are now savored and ridiculed by the liberal and conservative media at the mention of the USSR. But the most ridiculous thing is that all these shortcomings under socialism, as already described above, are generated precisely by market relations, whose apologists are these very conservatives and liberals. That is, they laugh and gloat over the fact that there was a shortage in the USSR, not understanding and not going to understand that the main reason for this shortage in the late USSR was the market they deified. All the processes described above began in the last years of Stalin's life, as he wrote in his work Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR. In this work, he provides ways to solve this problem by gradually transforming the collective farm sector into the state sector. That is, by displacing commodity production from agriculture and replacing it with product exchange, which has already been successfully implemented in Soviet industry. According to Stalin, this transformation should have taken place gradually, taking into account the growth of labor productivity in agriculture. The task of the governing bodies was to note the growth of labor productivity for the subsequent rejection of the market elements of labor incentives by converting collective farms into state-owned enterprises. But, unfortunately, the post-Stalinist leadership, under the treacherous wording of exposing the cult of personality, completely abandoned the theoretical legacy of Stalin and began to talk about the reforms that he opposed in his last work. For a more complete disclosure and understanding of this topic, I recommend reading the following articles. Was the collapse of the USSR objectively inevitable? and the reasons for the restoration of capitalism in the USSR. This concludes the first part of the article devoted to a critical analysis of Trotskyism. The second part will be published soon. P. Ravidin. Time and place.